I won't dwell on them. Green chemoprevention, or frugal medicine as we call it, is the mechanism, just simply the mechanism-driven use of dietary means to deliver chemoprotective phytochemicals. We think it's realistic. We think it can serve the rich and the poor alike, and that it's economically sustainable. In the populations where these non-communicable diseases or chronic illnesses are becoming more and more huge problems, and certainly will into the future, suggesting or trying to persuade someone that they should or could switch their diet a little bit, tweak their diet and eat this plant instead of this one, etc., is at least within the realm of possibility, whereas buying courses of antibiotics ain't. I mean, there are broad swaths of the world, as you all know, where you just can't anticipate drugging someone with pharmaceuticals of various sorts to prevent a disease that they may be at risk of, enhanced risk of, or may never have to worry about. So we like green chemoprevention from a global or public health perspective. In terms of evidence that it works, there's overwhelming evidence I won't go into here. You probably, if you're a student, you've probably talked about it or will talk about it in classes. But evidence that high fruit and vegetable consumption reduces or can reduce the risk of a variety of chronic diseases. And we and others, many others now, have obtained what we think is overwhelming evidence that a variety of edible plants contain inducers of the so-called phase 2 or cytoprotective enzyme response in people. And we'll talk a bit more about this. So I mentioned Paul Talalay, who hired me here. He, I would say more than just about anybody, is responsible for coining this term and defining sort of what goes into chemoprotection. He has pointed out, and we've drunk the Kool-Aid, and most of us who follow in his footsteps repeat this mantra, that all aerobic cells are constantly stressed by reactive oxygen intermediates, of course, toxic DNA damaging carcinogens, inflammation, infection, radiation, a lot of UV radiation, that can lead to cancer and chronic degenerative diseases. Cells contain certain protective or so-called phase 2 enzymes, phase 2 genes. Most of these are NRF2 dependent, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. They normally don't operate at maximal capacity, but they can be induced by a variety of pharmaceuticals, a variety of small molecules, and by a number of dietary phytochemicals. And that third point is that upregulating these enzymes, a key feature of which is enhancing or producing higher levels of the main cellular oxidant glutathione, is highly protective and reduces the risk of cancers and a variety of chronic degenerative diseases. In cartoon form, this is Tom Kensler and I put this together. It's essentially, we're saying there are a lot of insults that ultimately can or could lead to chronic diseases. There is an alphabet soup of effectors, of transcription factors, et cetera, et cetera. I've just listed 3 of them for reasons that will become obvious. Exercise, environment, all the fun stuff you can get in excess and can enhance or perhaps reduce, well, I wouldn't say sunlight. Yeah, I would. Can possibly reduce the risk of chronic disease, but certainly we know that diet and the phytochemicals contained in what you eat can modify your risk for cancer.